morning. I'm Basav Biradar, for those who don't know, and I've had the privilege of curating this retrospective of Girish Kasavelli. And see, if you are not here yesterday, we started, we had a longer introduction yesterday at 2:30, and then we screened his first film, which was set in pre-independence, Ghata Shraddha. Then we had a conversation with Girish, a longer moderated conversation, and also a informal Q&A with the audience as well. And then we had Tai Saiba, which was a 1997 film of his, in the evening. So today we are going to have three films. First is Gulabi Talkies, and then we will have Kurma Vatara at in the afternoon at 2:30, and then in the evening we have Kanasemba Kudreneri, the Riding the Stallion of Dream. Yeah, so that's the translation of the title. Kurma Vatara, of course, you will understand what it is. Gulabi Talkies is also fairly literal. There's no need of translation for that. So we will have these three film screenings today, and a conversation in the evening as well with Girish Kasavelli. He will also be available for a Q&A post Kurma Vatara, probably also Gulabi Talkies, depending on when he arrives. That's the thing. In the context, just to briefly say that the retrospective we are doing this, the reason why we wanted to do this is also because these films are not really available anywhere to watch, especially a good quality of them, right? Despite being there so much OTT channels, etc., some of these, what we call in great Indian cinema classics, are not available for us to watch. Hence, we thought it's important that we find new ways of exhibiting these films. In the last 2-3 years, we have done a retrospective of Syed Akhtar Mirza, Adur Gopal Krishnan, and now Girish Kasavelli, and we'll be continuing to do more. So if you have not signed up for BIC, etc., do all that, so that you get to know. And this is a series sort of which we are looking at Indian New Wave cinema, a new cinema movement which emerged in the late 60s, mainly because of two, three important happenings. One was obviously that post-independence, the Nehru government wanted to sort of figure out a way to how we can improve Indian cinema and make it world class and acclaimed all over the world, etc. So they set up a committee which was called S.K. Patil Inquiry Committee to sort of do some research around the film industry and come up with suggestions. So one of the suggestions which came out of that was to set up a film finance corporation through which they can finance independent filmmakers whose idea of the film seems to be very interesting or world-class, whatever that means, so that the Film Finance Corporation can fund it. That was the idea of Film Finance Corporation, and that's how the first initial, some of these what we call as Indian New Wave cinema came up. And also at that time, the second sort of influential thing which happened was FTII, the Film and Television Institute of India, was set up in 1961. So in 1961, we had, first film school. That was the first film school in India, right? So people who went to the film school got exposed to world cinema. I mean, remember, this is the time there is no television, no OTT, nothing, right? So nobody had, not many people in India were exposed to world cinema. But once we had FTII, there was a sudden exposure to world cinema, right? And also, thanks to Nehru's first government, there was also Indian International Film Festival, which was set up. In the first film festival, for example, Bicycle Thieves was shown, which is Italian neorealist classic, and it had a direct influence on people like Bimal Roy, Satyajit Ray, and obviously we see later films like, Bimal Roy's, what is the Balraj Sahni film? I forget the name. Do Biga Zameen, right? It came out, which is very much in the tradition of the Italian neorealism. And then Satyajit Ray's Appu trilogy, Patar Panchali, Aparajito, and Appur Sansar all came, which all had that sort of the European realism as the foundational base, right? And so International Film Festival then Film and Television Institute, where students were only watching world cinema. They were not watching, say, Bollywood or commercial Indian cinema while studying. So they were studying all these acclaimed European cinema. So there was sort of a completely new generation of people who were getting educated in a very different way about filmmaking. And in that tradition, many of these filmmakers come, including Girish Kasavalli, Mrinal Sen, Mani Kaul, Kumar Shani, all these people that we consider as, great filmmakers of India. Right, so in that tradition, we can, also one interesting thing which I think we didn't speak about yesterday is that one of the strategies the government came up with was that they had this assumption that, okay, if we pick interesting or already popular regional literature and adapt that to cinema, then it will be there is a percentage of success is quite high, because, so this was when Indira Gandhi was the Information and Broadcasting Minister, and, her team came up with this idea that, if we take regional literature, which, with popular novels in regional languages, and let filmmakers adapt them to cinema, the film has a greater success rate, was the assumption. So they started funding proposals of people who were proposing to adapt an already existing short story or novel. Hence, you'll see that many of the Indian New Wave initial films are adaptations of literature. Like Mani Kaul's Uski Roti is adaptation of Mohan Rakesh's short story called Uski Roti, a Hindi short story. Then even Bhuvan Shom as an adaptation of a Bengali novel called Bana Phool. Sara Akash similarly was an adaptation of a Hindi short story. So many of these things. So similarly in Kannada, if we think of it, in 1969, what we consider as the first Kannada new wave film came out, which was Samskara. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. Samskara was an adaptation of U.R. Ananthamurthy's novella called Samskara, right? And it was directed by Pattabi Rama Reddy and written by Girish Karnad, also starring Girish Karnad and Snehalata Reddy. So that became, very popular. It was a commercial success as well as a critical success. So, and at that time, the Kannada literature had this very modernist kind of attitude. There was all the literature that was written at that time was hugely influenced by the socialist movements, especially the Lohia, Ram Manohar Lohia's teachings. There was a lot of influence on the writers of that time, especially Kannada writers like Ananthamurthy, Lankesh, all these people. So many of their writings were ideologically influenced by the socialist ethos which were propagated by the political realm of socialist politics. So hence we had challenges to caste order, challenges to orthodoxy, women's emancipation. Many of these tropes became sort of the most recurring themes in the Kannada literature of the time. We had so after Samskara we had a film like Chomandudi. Chomanadudi was, which is in English, it's Choma's Drum. It's a story of a Dalit farmer who doesn't own a land and his only dream is to own a piece of land. And it was based on a novel by Shivram Karant, the great Shivram Karant. So, and it was directed by B.V. Karant. And that was a film which actually sort of, in a way, launched Girish, because Girish Kasavalli assisted B.V. Karant even while he was as a student in Film and Television Institute of India on Chomandudi. So obviously, a lot of this politics also, Girish happens to come from Tirthalli, which is the birthplace of Ananthamurthy as well, and which was at the center, or rather was the epicenter of all the socialist movements of Karnataka in 60s, 70s, 80s, almost up to 90s, I would say. Like DSS, Dalit Sangharsh Samiti, was very active there. And then there was Lohiyas were very active. If you have heard of Kagodu movement of farmers, right? Kagodu movement of farmers were for the land tenancy. They wanted to abolish tenancy and redistribute the land from the landlords. right? So, and Kagodu is a village in that region, very close to Girish's village, where the first protest happened, and Ram Manohar Lohia had come there, and all that, these kind of churns were happening, and amidst that, there was also Ninasam. Ninasam was a theatre institute which was set up by K.V. Subbanna, who also went on to win the Magsaysay Award. And K.V. Subbanna happened to be Girish Kasavalli's uncle. So he had that kind of exposure also to, to performing arts, especially because of the region. He also had exposure to Yakshagana, which was the most performed kind of art form in the village he was born in, right? So hence, all these influences sort of, and the ideologies kind of are very much seen in the kind of films Girish Kasavalli has made, which is also important for us to see it now, today, when more or less we have crossed those ideological strands as a country. We have moved on to a very neoliberal kind of setup. And so the whole, so what it would look like, the films give us a great window into how socialist thinking would look like, without being polemical or over the top or explicit, right? So, yeah, so that's the thing. So we started yesterday with, we tried to follow a chronology because Girish's work can be considered as a chronicling of Kannada society in many ways. So that's why we started. The first film was a pre-independence, and it dealt with a Brahmin widow's struggles inside with the Brahmin orthodoxy, right? And how, when she breaks the sexual code of conduct, what happens, etc. Ghata Shraddha literally means excommunication from the community, right? From the caste. So that was the first film we watched. And Thai Saiba was again with a female protagonist, which we see a recurring theme again in Girish's films. We had Thai Saiba was a film which kind of transitioned us from the discourse from pre-independence to post-independence, because that film spans the time from 1940s to 1964. It ends when Nehru dies. Of course, all this is happening in the background. It has nothing to do with the story, but it kind of tells you that time period story through a story of an ordinary woman, especially looking at a woman, not a man, as also, right? It's a very interesting film. I think a lot of people enjoyed it yesterday. So today we are going to start with Gulabi Talkies, like I said. So welcome you all. We'll also have a exhibition which is being set up as we speak. Yesterday it was set up, but some technical issue on the TV outside, where we have a lot of behind the scenes photographs from Girish's films, which will be playing in a loop. There is also a new book which Girish Kasavalli has written in Kannada about his work. It's a very great text because it talks about film form and how he approaches his film work. So it's structured as a conversation between a writer, Gopal Krishna Pai, and Girish Kasavalli. So it's in a Q&A structure, which is quite easy to sort of read. But it is a very niche, beautiful book because it talks about formalism as an attitude towards film aesthetics, right? So, so please, they will be on display there. If you can read Kannada, please, you can purchase the book as well, and you can also get it signed by Girish when he'll be there later. So with that, I would like to invite Professor Nikhila. Professor Nikhila teaches film studies in English and Foreign Language University, Hyderabad. She has come all the way for for this today. She will be conducting a conversation with Girish at 5:30 p.m. But right now, I want to invite her to the dais to introduce Gulabi Talkies for us in her own words. Yeah, thank you.
Very good morning to all of you. Thanks particularly to Basav for asking me to do this, to be here today. In the morning to introduce Gulabi Talkies, a much loved film. I've discussed it in many different fora, I've also shown it to students. But he's given me a kind of difficult task in the sense one would like people to watch a film rather than come between you and the film, predisposing you towards the film in particular ways. So I'm not sure I'll talk very much about the film per se, because that is something that you should enjoy and experience on your own. I'll talk a little bit around it. Just to give you a sense of how the film has garnered appreciation everywhere, wherever it has gone. At the 57th National Awards in 2008, the film got the Best Actress Award for Uma Shri. It has traveled to many international film festivals, the Italian Levante Film Festival, it's where it got the Best Screenplay Award. It's been exhibited in the Vesoul Film Festival in France, it's also won the Best Film and the Best Actress Award at the Ocean Film Festival of Asian and Asian and Arabic films. Of course, you will watch and you will yourself, see why it has garnered so much appreciation. I've kind of thought of this introduction as three different points. One is, in the book Bimba and Bimbana, Kasarwalli himself talks at length about this film, and he says that unlike many of his other films where there is an epicenter, there is a particular character around whom the film revolves, he says here it looks like there are two parts to the film. One part which deals with Gulabi and her story, and the other part which deals with the fishing community. And he says that there were two different styles of filmmaking which he has adopted for the two different parts of the film, trying to experiment with, a jerky, handheld, kind of unrefined camera movements for filming the fishing community and, the story that happens, that unfolds in the community, in the larger fishing community and the village. And another kind of more formalistic, trained kind of filmmaking style that he adopts for the Gulabi story. You will see that. Also very interestingly, he uses non-actors, most except for Uma Shri and a couple of others from theater background. Most of the others are people from the fishing village who have, come to play parts in the film. So in that sense, it's a very interesting film which uses the space and also people in that space in a very, very evocative manner. I want to talk about two aspects over here. One is, purportedly, this story is based on a Kannada short story by a writer called Vaidehi. Vaidehi's story was published in 1998. The Kannada story was published in 1998. If you're interested, in the English translation, you can there is a 2006 publication brought out by Penguin. It's called Gulabi Talkies and Other Stories. Tejaswini Niranjana has translated this particular story. So you're most welcome to go back and read the story after you have watched the film. Just to give you a sense of how far the film has traveled, from the story, not just in terms of theme, but also temporally. As I said, Vaidehi's story is 2 decades prior to this film. And the concerns of Vaidehi's story are about the coming of cinema. This is set probably around 1930s and 40s. So what happens when cinema or touring talkies actually comes to a particular village? How does it, enable people to access cinema, particularly women? It's concerned with the question of how women start accessing the public sphere. So what happens to women who are very much held within the sphere of their own homes? There is Lily Bai, who's the usher, who's the gatekeeper at the cinema. Lily Bai's presence encourages women to step out into the public sphere. So people start, particularly women and children, start going out to cinema. And interestingly, the title of the short story is Gulabi Talkisu Mattu Sanna Alegalu. So if you understand Kannada, Gulabi Talkies and new and small waves, So how does the coming of cinema kind of usher in modernity, usher in women and their going out into the public sphere? So cinema brings in a kind of energy and pushes women largely confined to their homes to go out, watch films, and therefore give them a certain sense of self. So the women who are afraid, for instance, to ask their husbands money now start demanding money and saying, okay, we want to watch the next film. So it's about, to me, the way I see it, it's about modernity and the possibilities that modernity, access to public sphere opens up. So this is the context of the story. 20 years later, Girish Kasarolli makes Gulabi Talkies. And I think one of the most fascinating things for me about this film is, of course, the different context, in the sense that now he's talking about, the end of the Doordarshan era. The skies are opening up. You have the onslaught of the satellite channels coming in. And they're not just coming in out there, it's all coming into your homes. So what is the impact of the coming of television, particularly in the form of private channels, into your homes? So it talks about, liberalization, it talks about globalization, how that impacts the very fabric of the community, village, your neighborhood, and within your home itself, what happens with the coming of television. And I think today we are kind of living out in a more, probably in a more grimmer fashion, the logic of what he kind of identifies right at the beginning here in 2008. But as I said, what for me is even more fascinating about this film is the way it kind of engages in conversation with Vaidehi's story. So it's a misnomer in some ways to me to say that it's based on Vaidehi's story. It's actually a kind of updation. It's actually a kind of dialogue with Vaidehi's story, because there are very, very interesting parts in the film where you will see him talk about the possibilities of cinema. How, Gulabi at some point actually says, of course I watch the same film every day, but it's not the same film that I'm watching every day. Vis-a-vis television, that though there are so many channels and I'm watching such, diverse content, it all feels the same. So this dialogue that he sets up between cinema and television is very, very fascinating. Probably when he comes here, we can ask him a little more about, how he thought of taking it in a different direction. For me, it's also interesting that his take on modernity, through this film, because clearly Vaidehi's story is pushing for modernity, public sphere, women's access, women stepping out of their homes, a different kind of subjectivity being shaped via cinema. Whereas here, it seems like he's a lot more pessimistic about television, and particularly about news television. Bourdieu wrote this, the famous French sociologist wrote this famous short essay called On Television, where he talks of the devil that news television has become. Kasarolli's film, gives a form and shape to that devil. And we see what are the implications of news television. He's kinder to other forms or other genres that we may encounter on television, such as the serials. because he sees that they still seem to carry potential of kind of, opening out worlds and possibilities of fantasy to women. But certainly in news television, it looks like, he's identified the ills of this kind of content on television. As I said, globalization, what globalization has done to us, I have to keep reminding myself that this is a film that came in 2008, because every time I watch this film, it seems so contemporary. It seems like, oh, it's something that has just come out, So these are, I think, some, by way of introduction, this is what I would like to briefly say. Without giving away too much of the film and allowing you to experience the wonderful film that Gulabi Talkies is. So thank you for your patient listening, and I think you can now take over. Thanks.
Should I ask?
Yes.
Okay. Girish sir, in 2008, Gulabi Talkies came out, right? And that was completely cinema verite style. You were, but in 4 years later, in 2012 here, you have switched from, the handheld, not handheld, the improvisational cinematography that you were talking about, that do not think about where you're placing the camera. And from here, very dramatic lighting setups and very dramatic camera setups. Obviously, that's an industry inside a movie that might have had an effect. So, did something change between 2008 to 2012, or you were just trying out something new here for, and yeah.
See, the structure of the film, the idiom, everything evolves from the theme, not from the plot, from the theme. So the Gulabi Talkies and its structure demanded cinema verite kind of style, whereas the theme and the content and this one dictated the form in Kurmavatara. So this didn't ask for a kind of a very verite kind of style at all. It needed a pakka kind of construction. And I went back to my usual style. In fact, between this film, Gulabi Talkies, and Kurmavatara, I have made another film called Kansemba Kudreneri, which you are going to see after the Q&A. So that has a different style altogether. So the style of the film, the content, the vision of the filmmaker decides what style one decides for that particular content. So while I was making Kurmavatara, since the title itself is about a mythology and references to where I am using mythology as a metaphor, I thought cinema verite is not the right approach. So that's one of the reasons why I have used very, calculated construction. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. I also wanted to know about. I also wanted to know about your experience with the very dramatic lighting. This is the stage-like lighting, right?
Not, I won't say stage lighting, but it's very stylized lighting. In fact, it's about somebody performing, somebody personifying other, like Anand Rao personifying Gandhi. It actually means acting. What is acting actually? One man becomes the other one. One man becomes the other. So this is some kind of a content which always fascinated me. And I was thinking, how do I bring this out? There are two ways. I become another person when through reflection and through mirror image. So I started concentrating on that. That became the central metaphor for the film. The shadow and the mirror image. So that being the central metaphor, I told my cinematographer we need to use lighting in a very stylized way. I wouldn't say it's a dramatic. You must have seen a lot of V.K. Murthy kind of film. You also must have seen a lot of Western films wherein lighting has been used very creatively. So in Indian this context, we have two prominent styles of film, lighting. One is that of Subrata Mitra, where everything is bounced, the light, he uses the bounce light so that everything becomes, it is realistic. The other is stylized, wherein you, as a technician, the cameraman decides how to lit up the whole scene. He doesn't go by the logic of the real, but the logic of the content. So these are two different styles altogether. One that of Subrata Mitra, which Roy used it very effectively. The other is that of what we see in the Bombay, well-made Bombay films, mainstream. And in that we have best example is V.K. Murthy. It's not only in mainstream, even in the serious cinema. Like you say, take for example any of the European masters, some of the European masters, not all. They use this kind of stylized lighting in a very meaningful way. So, probably Bhaskar would like to add.
No, as Sir was saying, there are two schools of lighting, the realistic and the stylized. And in India, in the modern Indian cinematography, we refer to Subrata Mitra and V.K. Murthy as the pillars of modern Indian cinematography in that sense. Because anything that we do as cinematographers has to fall in between the two of them. A mix of either of the two or choose one of them. Fortunately, in this film, we had space to kind of combine both. When we came to the shots of Gandhi, which were staged for the camera in the film itself, we followed the V.K. Murthy style of lighting, where it is a lot of the American noir kind of style of lighting. And when it was on the other side, when it was in the home, it was more of the realistic lighting setup. There also, when the family leaves him alone, you must have seen a lot of patchy lighting there, kind of bringing out his solitude, which was again stylized. It was not realistic in that sense, but it contributes to the mood of the film. That's what we thought. Yes.
So in both movies, the previous one, Gulabi Talkies, and this one as well, I noticed that you used animals as sort of peripheral characters. So like there was a cat that was just sort of about. It did not have per se a major impact. And here as well, there was a tortoise. Although it had more of an impact, it wasn't that key an element of the story. So what is your say on that, and how do you use animals like that, and what is the thought process behind that?
It's true that in Gulabi Talkies I used cat, but I used cat as a realistic detail. It doesn't serve any more purpose, you see, any additional meaning to it. There's no additional meaning to it. Whereas in Kurma Avtara, the kurma itself is a metaphor, and it's a mythological metaphor, I have explained it in the film itself, in the text of the film itself, you see that. It's Lord Vishnu taking the burden. So here, we think, can Gandhian values take the burden? So here it becomes a kind of a mythical metaphor. So in both the films you have animals, but they are used for two different purposes.
The role of Godse and its treatment is that, because you have that interesting scene where the gentlemen come from outside and who are quite unhappy that Godse has been given to a Muslim character. They seem to be very eager to claim it for themselves. Perhaps because they are proud of Godse, or On the other hand, they should have been delighted that Godse was characterized as a Muslim. To the degree that they admired Gandhi, they are angry that, I don't know, it can be read in so many different ways. Just wanted to ask you that, was that there in the short story? Or is that your original contribution to that scene?
Godse's character is there, but he interprets in a different way. The writer, the original writer, interprets in a different way. You need to keep one thing in mind. The story was written much earlier, and the film was made in 2009, when this kind of polarization hadn't happened yet. So the Godse people started valorizing Godse recently. But in 2009, we didn't have that kind of reason. But I somewhere anticipated that we are moving towards that. When I normally don't sit through my films, but today I just wanted to see. And suddenly it occurred to me, see, in 2009, I had brought out certain tensions, which has become real now. But the society was moving in that direction. That we realized not only in Gulabi Talkies, I have even spoken about it much earlier also, in the earlier films also.